Hi, in this mini lecture, we're going to be looking at some of the concepts in Chapter 5. Here are the learning objectives. You may pause the video to read them. So let's start out by talking about a long-term objective. A long-term objective is really what we expect to happen when we pursue certain strategies. Long-term objectives are traditionally 2 to 5 years. Some would say anything over a year, but for the purpose of our book, we'll say 2 to 5 years. These objectives help to provide direction, identify synergies, identify what we should evaluate, establish our priorities, reduce uncertainty, minimize conflicts, stimulate exertion, and help to aid in the allocation of our resources, so time, money, people, etc. So there's 5 characteristics of objectives. Sometimes you'll hear the term SMART objectives. So they need to be quantifiable, so measurable, so we can measure them. They need to be understandable and clear. They need to at least somewhat challenge us. They shouldn't be so challenging that we can't achieve them, but they should be challenging enough that they stretch us to improve. They need to be vertically and horizontally in a chain of command, and they need to be obtainable, realistic. So there's a difference between financial versus strategic objectives. So financial objectives really look at those financial ratios that we talked about in the last chapter. So growth in revenues, earnings, higher dividends, profit margins, ROI, earnings per share, stock prices, cash flows, etc. Our strategic objectives include things like increasing our market share, increasing on-time delivery, shorter design to market time, so getting our products to market faster, increasing our geographic coverage, having technological leadership, etc. All right, so I'm sure that you have heard the concept called managing by objectives. The managing by objectives just means that we manage and we make decisions based on the objectives that we set or the strategies that we set. We prefer to manage by objectives. We'd rather not have to manage by crisis, hope, extrapolation, or mystery. But it's a pretty common term, managing by objectives. And it's a pretty common practice. So I thought you wanted to know about that. So there's different types of strategies, and we're going to talk about each of them next. So most organizations pursue a combination of 2 or more strategies at the same time, but you shouldn't do all of them, all right? So we can't pursue every strategy possible because we don't have the resources to do that, and it probably wouldn't be successful, and you'll see why in a little bit. But we need to pursue, 1, 2, 3 strategies at a time because we have to make decisions and we have to prioritize what we're going to work on first. All right, so let's look at the different types of strategies. I'm not going, well, we will actually look at this. So forward integration is gaining ownership or increased control over distributors. So Amazon began rapid delivery services in the US cities. Right? So they're forward integrating, they're gaining control of that supply chain, those distributors. They became the distributor. Backward integration is when a company seeks ownership or more control of their suppliers. So for example, Starbucks purchased a coffee farm so it could source its own coffee. Horizontal integration is seeking ownership or increased control over competitors. So this is where you'll see a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Market penetration is trying to increase our market share for our present products or services and hoping through greater marketing efforts. So Under Armour is trying to increase their marketing share by signing tennis champion Andy Murray to a sports sponsorship deal. Market development is introducing our current products or services to a new geographic area. So in this example, Gap opened its first 5 stores in China. Product development is seeking increased sales by improving our current products and services or developing new ones. So for example, Amazon just began offering its own line of baby diapers and wipes. They've been starting, I think it's called Amazon Essentials or Basics, I can't remember, but I will buy their batteries. So they make their own batteries. Related diversification is adding new products or services that are similar to what we already have. So when Facebook acquired Instagram or the text messaging firm WhatsApp, they're all really related. Unrelated diversification is adding new or unrelated products or services. So Kroger and Whole Foods started to add a new product of cooking meals or becoming restaurants. Retrenchment is when we try to regroup our costs or try to end asset reduction in order to reverse declining sales and profits. So a lot of times you'll see stores closing. We're seeing a lot of this in bricks and mortars right now. So for example, Staples closed 250 stores and reduced by 50% the size of its other stores. So they're trying to save costs there. Trying to think of another one. I know like Burger King near my house just closed, probably for those reasons. Divestiture is selling a division or part of an organization. So when Sears owned Land's End and Sears was in trouble, and we know that Sears has completely closed now, but they ended up selling Land's End in hopes of gaining some revenue or cash. And then liquidation is when we sell all of our company's assets, and we liquidate. And so they talk about the Trump Taj Mahal, but after when Sears was completely decided to close, they just liquidated and sold everything. We've seen that with Kmart recently too. They closed other stores, they liquidated their inventory, and they're done. All right, I'm going to talk about that. All right, so again, just kind of reviewing forward integration. So we can talk about integration strategies. So forward integration is gaining ownership or control over distributors or retailers. Backward is getting control over suppliers. And horizontal is seeking ownership or increased control over competitors. And so I have some examples. So backward integration. Here is an example. Apple purchased a factory to produce their own chips and touch screens for their products. So they gained control over their suppliers. Forward, Live Nation merged with Ticketmaster to sell tickets of concerts they promote. So Live Nation creates concerts. They merged with Ticketmaster and as a way to gain control over the supply chain to promote their specific concerts. Here's horizontal. Kraft and Heinz were competitors. They merged, and I think it was a merger, and created really quite a large conglomerate. And you can see that they actually have 98% penetration in North American households, or Kraft did. But you can see some of the statistics here. So they were two companies, they were fiercely competitive, and they just came together to become even more powerful. Although in that case, you have to be really careful not to become a monopoly. And monopolies are when one company owns pretty much the majority, but there are other competitors, so it's okay. Let's look at intensive strategies. So we can have a market penetration strategy. And we talked about this a little bit. Again, we're trying to increase market share for our current products through marketing. Market develop, we're trying to create, introduce our current products or services into new markets. So this could be new areas of a specific country. It could be entering new countries with our products and services. And then product development is increasing sales by either improving, modifying, or creating new products or services. Let's talk about diversification strategies. So there's related diversification, and related is when you're doing business and you maybe have, let's say you make SUVs and then you decide to diversify and make pickup trucks, right? So they're related. Unrelated diversification would be like if you make cars and in order to diversify your portfolio, you decide to also make bikes. They're not really related. What it's doing is it's diversifying your portfolio. So if cars don't perform well, maybe the bikes will. All right, defensive strategies, we don't want to be here. This is where we don't want to be. Retrenchment is we are trying to regroup through cost and asset reduction. we're trying to reverse declining sales. All right, so a lot of times um, you'll see um, maybe they'll start to look at, okay, what are our costs? How can we cut costs? How can, you might see layoffs in this piece in a retrenchment strategy. A divestiture strategy is when they start to sell off parts of an organization. This is usually to raise capital for different acquisitions or investments, or sometimes it's just because of a cash flow issue. And then liquidation is when a company goes under, as we might call it, put that in quotes, goes under. They're no longer going to be in business, and they just sell off all their assets. So that's their buildings and their inventory and so forth. Right? So your book also talks about this concept of value chain analysis and benchmarking. And value chain analysis is really where we just determine the value of each and all activities that go into producing and marketing a product, based from the raw materials to the manufacturing to the distribution and to marketing. And we use benchmarking, which really just allows us to look at what are best practices, what are other firms doing, how do we compare to our competitors and other firms. And so this is an example. In this, you would look at all your suppliers' costs, all your production costs, distribution, and you would see what costs go into each area. And then you would be able to take yours, and if you have access, you would go and say, okay, well, how does this compare to the rest of the industry? All right, the last, one other thing we want to talk about here is, or that your book talks about, is Michael Porter's 2 generic strategies. So he says there's a cost leadership and a differentiation strategy. So this is kind of similar to the other strategies we've also already talked about. It's just Michael Porter's view. So there's 2 types. There's a low-cost strategy that offers products and services to a wide range of customers, think Walmart. And then there's a narrow or focused low-cost strategy that offers products and services to a small range of customers at one of the lower prices in the market. So think Dollar General. And then there's a differentiation strategy. And there's a wide differentiation strategy where we try to differentiate our products and services to a wide target market, and a narrow differentiation strategy where we try to differentiate towards a narrow target market. So think of a wide target market like we're producing products and services that we consider unique, but we're trying to get them to a lot of people. So think of like Nordstrom's. They have a little bit higher end products and services, so that's how they're differentiating themselves from other retailers. Like they're not a JCPenney's or a Kohl's, but they still reach out to a wide market. For a narrow target market, think of the clothing store. Trying to think of what it's called. um, Well, think of a really like niche boutique store that has a very narrow target market, and is has a really unique products and services and a really small target market. We call that kind of a niche. I can't think of the company I'm thinking of. It's on the tip of my tongue. Sorry. All right, so this is what it looks like. So we have cost leadership, broad market, low cost. Narrow cost focus is narrow target market, low cost. Differentiation, broad, is we're differentiating to a broad market. Differentiation focus is we have a narrow market with differentiation. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about today is strategic management and nonprofit and small firms. So just so you understand the difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit is that for-profits are in the business of making money for their shareholders or stockholders or whatever that looks like. Nonprofits, it's not that they don't make money, but all the money that they make goes back into their cause. Another big differentiation is that nonprofits don't pay taxes and they don't have shareholders that are providing this capital. All right, that's it for chapter 5. Contact me with questions.